My name is Amor Montes De Oca. I am the Executive Director of Illinois Women in Cannabis. IWC is a nonprofit that seeks to serve, support, and advance women within the Illinois cannabis industry. As the industry continues to mature, we are focused on using education, networking, and mentorship to facilitate opportunities for women who are exploring, connected to, and/or employed in the regulated cannabis industry. Now I'd like to welcome my guests to join me on the stage. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome. Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to get us started in our conversation today. There's a lot of interest. And I'd like to ask my guests to introduce themselves and share with us what you do in the cannabis industry and the unique perspective that you bring to our discussion today. Please.
My name is Laura Yee, and I am what they call a Trendspotter, so to speak, but really cover food. I've been covering food in the restaurant space and the consumer space for over 20 years. About a decade ago, which seems like a long time, we were part of a rebranding effort with USFood, and we created a food magazine, which I brought my props to show you, Food Fanatics. And we've been publishing this for US Foods for 10 years. It comes out quarterly, and it's about food trends, right? And this issue in particular was summer 2019. We wrote about cannabis for the first time for bars and restaurants and that sort of thing. And then a few years ago, actually 5 years ago, we launched the first culinary cannabis magazine called Kitchen Toke, which I helped launch, and we're still publishing it. You can get a subscription. I have a few copies if anyone would like one. But my experience is mostly in food service now, just covering the industry for about 20 years. So if you want to know what's coming, what's hot, what's going to happen in 2022, feel free to ask. That's my experience, just covering it from a consumer and B2B perspective.
Great, thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Alison Disney. I'm a partner and business strategist at Receptor Brands. We're a brand marketing and advertising agency based here in Chicago. And prior to my life in cannabis, spent a lot of time on the CPG side, working at major holding company ad agencies like Omnicom and Publicis.
Hi, my name is Chelsea Bedard. I'm the Chief Revenue Officer of a little beverage company called Cann. We operate in 5 states across the United States. We're expanding to another state later this year, and we are going international. My experience is actually not in the CPG business or the cannabis industry. I came from the high-tech world and frankly had a very large sales team that I ran around the world and wanted a way to relax at the end of the day that didn't include a hangover. And that did not exist until I met Cann. Loved the brand and had to be part of it. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Owens. Hello, I'm Jennifer Owens. I am partner and CEO of Beverage Solution Partners. BSP is a fully woman-owned beverage company and canning facility in St. Louis. I'm also here representing Society Brands. We are here downstairs, and so we'll be talking about all of that today as well.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's start by discussing how women's preferences are represented in the fastest growing infused beverage category. Laura, would you like to kick us off?
Well, what we're seeing actually in food service is not so much a preference of men versus women. It's more focused around functional foods and health, right? So the industry was kind of on a upwards trend for CBD in cocktails specifically. And that kind of took a dive, as you know, restaurants took a huge hit from the pandemic, and we think that in 2022 and the years following, that it'll pick up again, right? Because right now there's this gray area whether you can put CBD in drinks or not, right? But restaurants are doing it. It's just a matter of, where that's happening. So there really isn't a preference, but there is an interest, though, in infused drinks. And of course, there's also the private catering events that are going to happen, that are so-called underground, which is happening as well. But we see this, the big trend, what we see is when chain restaurants, the bigger restaurants that are across the country, when they start adding it to their beverage offerings, and we think that's going to happen as legalization continues. Great.
Allison, do you have something to add?
Sure. I think from a brand and marketing perspective, if I can speak to that, we heard Tracy and Tara talking about it earlier today. I think you'll start to see more infused beverages talking not just about the ingredients and the technology they're infused with, but what's the benefit to the consumer they're getting for using it, whether it's functional or emotional. What am I getting as a consumer from choosing one drink over another?
Great. Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, we initially thought that when launching our product, we were going to be geared towards women. When we look at the data, I'm a data person, I love it. It's actually about a 50-50 split. And what's interesting is that, you're speaking to some of like the calories, what's in it. For us, we wanted full transparency on ingredients. So any fingers that I have on my hands, what's in Cann. Being able to understand what you're drinking and putting into your body, your food, anything, people are more interested in that these days than they were, 10, 15, 20 years ago. So what we're really finding is that it's not necessarily geared towards women, but it is people that are looking for a healthier lifestyle change. And some of those things are lower calories, no added sugar, no hangover. That was the big draw for me. But I think the opportunity of like a healthier future for everyone is really what we're aiming for.
Great.
Yeah, and I would almost mimic that. I would say for us, we definitely, from the packaging of society all the way to just making sure that it's a low dose, is something that was important to us, and we think that's something that women want. I know for me, like being able to have just a little something to take the edge off is important, and like Chelsea just said, not have a hangover, because I just don't have time for that. So we were really looking at what is going to be for the women consumer.
Great. Thank you so much. Let's move on and discuss how do we see brands and retailers responding to women's influence on branding, trial along path to purchase, and the consumer experience at point of sale.
I'll jump in again
Jump
from
in.
a brand
Yes,
marketing
please.
standpoint. I think you'll start to see brands and retailers working more together, I think, to speak to the female consumer. Until now, there's been so much in brands on the wholesale side trying to reach that end user, but retailers are starting to figure out who their shopper is too. So I think there's going to be a lot more collaboration in terms of how am I really meeting the shopper's need, both from a shopping experience perspective, but then also offering the wholesale products in that shopping experience that appeal to me as a buyer when I'm looking for a beverage.
Great. Chelsea, do you have something to add?
I do. So I have a lot of conversations with retailers, and they're always looking for the same three things: repeat purchases, higher basket sizes, and new consumers. And the best way to grab new consumers is through a format like a beverage, whether that's men or women. People are less concerned about doing something that they know how to do, whether it's sharing a coffee with a friend or a glass of wine. Like, everyone around the world knows how to do this, but you hand them a vape pen or an edible, and they have questions like, how is this going to impact me? How am I going to feel it? So I think that retailers are really opening up and realizing that, microdosing is a newer concept in the cannabis space, but that concept of microdosing through beverages is incredibly strong because you're reaching a much wider network. So I have this conversation all the time, is if we continue as a cannabis industry to position ourselves to the high dose consumer, we're never going to break down the stigma in the walls of getting people to understand that this plant is really incredible and can really bring more people into our world. And you can do that best by beverages.
I love that. Great. Let's talk about quality control. I know it's a hot button issue in our industry and with cannabis consumers. How do infused beverages consistently deliver taste and in dosage? I know dosing is one of the top questions for our industry. Can we spend a little time talking about this? What do you guys?
Well, that's one of the biggest concerns among restaurateurs and bartenders and mixologists, right? They're hesitant because they don't know how much to put in drinks. So there's a big educational piece that needs to happen, which would come from suppliers, distributors, right?
Yeah.
The product.
Absolutely. And, making a cannabis beverage is hard. It is not an easy thing to do. Making a cannabis beverage that tastes good is also incredibly difficult. And I think one of the things that we've recognized is there's a lot that's out there on the market. And if somebody gets hold of a cannabis beverage that they don't like the flavor, they've now turned it off in their brain. They're like, nope, not for me. Cannabis beverages are not for me. And they're not open to trying a new beverage somewhere else. Whereas you have a beer that you don't like and you're like, I didn't like that beer, but you're not going to stop drinking beer, you're not going to stop drinking wine. So it's a really, really important part and we believe in the concept of the beverage category. Like, people say to me all the time, they're like, who are you worried about? Who's your biggest competitor? And it's like, I love that there's other beverages out there, because now people are walking into a dispensary and they're recognizing there's options and there's a refrigerator that has beverages in it. Because when I go to, I still drink wine. People ask me that all the time too. Like, are you anti-alcohol? No, I just drink about 80% less. But I still like my glasses of wine, and I will switch between different types and varietals in the same way that I hope in the future that there's many types and options of beverages.
And if I could just build on that too, I think a big piece of building in that quality control and the consistency around your product is getting consumer feedback. I think it is so hard to make these products, and then you finally get them made and you put them out into the world and you kind of cross your fingers and hope that consumers like them. But if you're not consistently soliciting feedback from your consumer, especially if you're in a multi-state operation, then you're really not getting those insights required to make sure that you're continually improving and dialing in that product experience for your user.
Yeah, and I think with Society we use nano emulsion technology, which really keeps the THC throughout the entire can, which is really important. You also have the exo top, that allows you to have some dosage and then close it, and it's not really allowing anything changing in the beverage. So that's really important to us too. When we're looking at quality, we want to make sure across the board, from the time that we produce it to the time that it gets to our consumer, that it's still of the highest quality.
One other thing that I would add about the consistency is that people still do not understand cannabis. They definitely do not understand cannabis beverages. So we've been asked many, many times, our highest dose can is 5 milligrams. People are like, are you going to come out with a 25 milligram, 100 milligram? No, because it is very confusing to a consumer if they see our cute little pink cans and think, oh, I know that brand. It's like Bud Light. I know Bud Light. I know what it's going to give me from an impact. If people start to pick up something and have a bad experience, that's bad for the industry. And I think that it's really important, as brands, that we're holding to, we are a microdose beverage. We are not going to provide you a 25 milligram or 100 milligram drink. And I hope there's others that do incredible beverages. That's just not the space we're gonna fit into.
That's great. All right. What are unique business-to-business solutions that were required for a unique category, your innovations and others? Please feel free to jump in. All
right, I'll go. Probably less from a supply and manufacturing standpoint, but I was talking about consumer feedback a minute ago. I think there's sort of this myth that there isn't good data out there that's available, especially if you're a manufacturer. That first-party data that you're gathering as you build that product and then as you move it out into the market is full of golden nuggets in terms of creating an experience that's great for the consumer. And while there is certainly lots of great data suppliers in cannabis that are kind of emerging and coming up in the category, there's also a lot of really creative ways to get access to data too. When you look at keyword searches longitudinally, when you look at some mainstream omnibus surveys and things like that, and actually even launching custom studies and things are easier and easier every day for cannabis and CBD-infused products. So when it comes to B2B and really understanding your retail customer or your end user, whichever audience you're speaking to, I think there's a wealth of data out there that's available that's pretty well untapped right now.
Awesome. Thank you.
I would say with BSP, we are a mobile canning line. So that allows us to have a very small footprint, and it allows us to just go right up to our partners like Society. And that allows Society to invest more into what they want to have, and it allows them to be more specialized, and they will partner with us and we have more of availability to be specialized in our own way. So.
I completely agree with that. So Cann, we do not manufacture any of our own product. We leverage co-packers, separate co-packers in every state that we operate in currently, which has its own challenges and new learnings every single time, but it allows us to focus on what we're really good at, and that is the branding, that is the marketing, and that is creating delicious beverages that we have somebody else produce. It definitely allows us to focus more, and I think give others the opportunity to enter into the space too.
That's great. Before we move on to wrap our conversation, I want to let our audience know that we have a few minutes for Q&A. If you want to start thinking about some questions for our panelists. I'm going to move in to wrap our conversation and ask our panelists for their New Year prediction or resolution. Laura?
We think that the way cannabis will move into food service, into restaurants, bars, corporate food service, will definitely be through health and wellness, right? It's just, cannabis is looked at now as something that's good for you, something that can be a part of your everyday routine, not something that's going to just get you high and party and that sort of thing. So you're going to see that more and more, and there's going to be a big educational piece behind that as well. I think people today versus 5 years ago when we launched the magazine, there's much greater awareness. So while the pandemic, put a full stop to restaurants and their innovation, I think after this year into 2022, restaurateurs are going to start looking at the bottom line again and see how can they improve their profits and bring in more people. And they're going to look at cannabis and how that fits into their food service, whether it's just CBD, whether it's going to be through drinks mixed into cocktails and that sort of thing.
Great. Alison?
I guess my prediction is that we're going to see consumables just proliferate like we've never seen before in terms of flavors, varieties, formats, sizes. I think there's sort of a set of consumables right now in the brands that operate in the space, and 2022 I think we're going to see that explode in terms of options for the consumer.
Amazing.
Chelsea? I completely agree. I think what we believe in at Cann is the future of drinking. It's a new type of bar cart. It has beer, it has wine, and it has Cann. And when I say Cann, I do not mean our Cann, although I'd love you to be drinking our Cann. What I mean by that is a cannabis microdose beverage, and that can come in many formats, but it's really giving people the option to look at how they socialize in a different way.
Yeah, with BSP and Society, I think we're in Missouri, so we're already looking at what we need to be doing when Missouri goes rec. We are also looking at where we can be for an all-day beverage, right? Something in the morning to pep you up, and then obviously something in the evening that's going to slow you down a little bit and get you to relax. So that's our predictions right now, but really, just like Chelsea said, we're hoping that we can socialize cannabis through the Cann.
All right, well, thank you so much. I'd like to open the floor to our audience for questions, please.
Thank you for this fabulous group. Real quick question. You mentioned that the male-female split was surprisingly about 50-50. I'm wondering, is that based on the actual use research or who buys it? Because, of course, if I buy a 4-pack, I might split it with my honey or vice versa. So just wondering if you had insight on that.
Great question. It is based off of purchase. That being said, we do see on average every 6-pack that is purchased is shared between 2 to 3 times with loved ones and friends and family. So we're working on getting some more data to be sure on what that actually looks like, but the amount of consumers that are purchasing Cann today is 50-50.
Great. Any other questions from our audience today? Please.
I'd love to get some thoughts on existing alcohol and non-alcohol beverage brands moving into the space.
I believe in it. I mean, we're here. I think that what the beverage alcohol beverage companies are starting to see is that this is a train that they're either going to be on or off. I relate it often to Netflix and Blockbuster. Blockbuster did not want to change, and I believe there's one left in Portland, Oregon. Not to say that people are going, again, I don't think anyone's ever going to give up beer and wine, but I think that this is something that they're interested to get into this space, and when you have these large-scale manufacturers that have the facilities to be able to produce beverages like this, they'd be crazy not to be getting into this market, and I know many of them are looking at it.
I think you also need to think about those categories as the competition too, right? We can't just be focused on the THC-infused beverage operators as your competition. You're fighting for the drinking occasions of your consumer throughout the day and all the other things they drink. So when you look at the non-alcoholic space, for example, you're looking at great beverage offerings that have adaptogens and probiotics. You can drink collagen in a can. Consumers have a lot of choice. So THC has a certain functional benefit or emotional benefit for consumers, but as a brand, what are you doing to compete with everything else they can drink?
Awesome.
It retails before tax for $24 for a 6-pack, and it's $28 for a high boy 4-pack. The high boys are 5 milligrams of THC. The classic 6-packs are 2 milligrams of THC, 4 milligrams of CBD. So that is the price in Illinois. We do have different pricing across the United States. We're trying to be competitive in different markets, but it is the higher end craft beer that we're trying to go after. And as we get better with manufacturing and bringing our costs down, we want to bring our costs down to our consumers too. Great question. We weren't sure. We launched those officially in April of this year, and what we've seen is they're right in pace with our original 6-packs. It's kind of, there's people are starting to graduate, myself included. I used to have like 1 or 2 cans, and I'd be like, whoa, I am not going to, have a long, lengthy conversation. But if now for me, sometimes I want literally more volume for liquid, or I want a little bit more, just like I would go for a darker beer. It's giving people that option of which area they want to settle into. We're starting to see that people have different reactions to pure THC without CBD. I've got an employee that she does not feel anything under 300 milligrams. And for her, she feels the classic 2 milligram, 4 milligram CBD cans before she feels the high boys. So it's, again, giving people options as we're starting to realize that people are metabolizing cannabis very differently, just as we as humans metabolize alcohol differently.
Yes, please.
You spoke about the emulsifier technology, about distribution. I'm curious if there's any other sort of technology trends that are going to impact the way these drinks come to life for consumers and benefits that we should look out for.
Thank you.
We launched a product, Red Belly Honey, earlier this year. That's a honey that's infused by bees, right? And when the bees process this honey, it's water soluble and it has high bioavailability. So you can mix that into a seltzer or any other kind of drink, and it's not going to, it's processed by the bee already, so there's not that whole liver thing that comes into play and the oil floating to the top in beverages. So I think that kind of technology is happening, and there's a number of researchers in Israel that are looking at ways of handling beverages, and that's similar to the emulsification that you're talking about. What's happening, the research.
Thank you.
I know that our brains of the operations are in booth number 23. They will be able to answer that for you.
Great.
I think for us, what we're seeing, it's not just the technology, it's also different cannabinoids that are being brought into. So in California, there's some Delta 8 varietals out there. There's THCV. People are starting to recognize CBN is huge. And so like bringing those into drinks, I think is probably going to be the next phase, because as you said, there's different times of the day. This cannabis beverage, for us, we are your social beverage, but I believe that there are others that are going to come out that are your morning beverage, or your late night beverage. Like that concept, I think, is very real.
Well, and when you touch on other cannabinoids, still hard to say, cannabinoids, I think there will be some interesting developments too on the R&D side when you look at supply. So talk to your cultivators, talk to your suppliers. As the product improves in terms of the ingredient, formulations are going to have to change to adapt to how those things change too.
And you had a question? Go ahead.
So I live in Pennsylvania, which is a medical-only state. They don't sell, gummies in the dispensaries and that kind of thing, but they do sell tinctures, some of which, either in the reviews on the websites or when you're talking about the bartenders there will say, they put it in their tea. And I'm wondering, is that kind of DIY sort of direction of customer acquisition strategy, or is that not a good idea? I feel like I haven't seen kind of guidance on how to best do that. I'm wondering what role sort of like alternatives to the CPG side of the cannabis drinking space you advocate or you think good, or where that's going.
So for Cann, we have a liquid packet called a Rhodey. It's available in California right now. We will be expanding that across the United States, but it's it's the non-ready to drink version. So you take it on the go, liquid packet that you rip and pour in a drink. I think that's a huge opportunity too, because I think beverages allow people to consume cannabis in a discreet way, but I'm not going to walk into a restaurant with a can in my pocket. Somebody is going to see that. I do, however, walk into restaurants with Rhodeys in my pocket and just rip that and pour it into my drink. So I think the concept of tinctures, or what we're doing, is definitely a way to kind of expand what the industry is doing.
Any other questions from our audience?
Whatever your heart desires. It is soda water. I've liked putting it on ice cream because it's literally, we started with our lemon lavender, which it's lemon juice, agave, lavender, and cannabis. And so taking that, pouring it on, it's like a little bit of a syrup on ice cream. It's delicious. People put it in salad dressing. People are putting it into up to 180 degrees. You can put it into tea. There's many, many ways to consume it, and we found that our consumers are being really creative with it.
I love it. That's great.